Okay, in this video we're going to be creating this gearbox side plate. So this is a plate, it's a mostly two-dimensional part. So we'll create this by creating one main sketch which has most of these features on it and extruding that 0.260 inches because it's made out of 0.260 inch thick plate. And then we'll later come through and add these two counter bores. We can see that they go down only part of it. Okay. So I'll go to SolidWorks, create a new part, and looking at it, we'll start by modeling this main bearing bore as the center of the part. So we can see that that has a diameter of 0.124, 0.123, provides two numbers, manufacturing tolerance, telling the manufacturer to make it between these two values. So we'll just make it right in between. So we'll create a new sketch, we'll make it on the top plane, and create a circle with diameter using the Smart Dimension tool to 1.1235. Now looking at our drawing, the next thing we'll create is this upper bearing bore, which has 0.874, 873 diameter. We'll create it right in between again. We'll create another circle, Smart Dimension it. Right in between. And now, because they're right above each other, we'll click the centers of both and then add a vertical relation. Now they're right above each other on the part. And now to know how far apart they need to be, we'll look at our drawing and we can see this dimension of 1.877 inches. So we'll use the Smart Dimension tool to dimension it. And now we have our two main bearing bores. So the next thing we're going to create is the side motor holes. So we're just going to create one set and then we can mirror it to create the other set. So we can see that it has a diameter of 0.755. So we'll use the circle tool, create a circle, Smart Dimension it to 0.755. Then now to know where it needs to be positioned, we can see it has an X dimension. It has an X dimension and a Y dimension. So we'll first add the Y of 1.473. We'll go to SolidWorks, Smart Dimension tool, click the center here, move the mouse around until you get the right area, and then we'll dimension that to 1.473. And now to add the X dimension, 1.509, go to SolidWorks, Smart Dimension tool, Smart Dimension tool from the center of one to the center of the other, 1.509 inches. Now looking at our drawing, the next thing we need to create is these holes. So to do that, we'll create this line that goes between them, and then we'll create the two holes on the ends of the line. So we'll go to SolidWorks, create a center line, just make it anywhere, and then we'll set it so the midpoint of that center line, let's move that dimension out of the way, the midpoint of that center line by selecting the center of this circle and that line at a midpoint relation, so that's the middle. Now if we look at our drawing, we can see that it's 4.5 degrees off vertical. So we'll go into SolidWorks, add a vertical line just between the two center bores, and then using the Smart Dimension tool, click our line in the vertical line, add a 4.5 degree relation. Now we'll add the two holes on the ends of the line. We can select both and add a relation to make them equal. And on our drawing we could see that they are 0.196 inches. So we'll use the Smart Dimension tool, dimension one of them, 0.196. And now they both are dimensioned. And then finally, to make it fully defined, we need to set the length of this line. So we could see it says that these holes are on a 2-inch diameter bolt circle. So therefore we can conclude that the length of the line is 2 inches. So using the Smart Dimension tool, make sure the line is angled when you dimension it, not straight. Set it to 2 inches. Now that we've created one motor hole and one set of motor mount holes, we can mirror it about the center line to create the other set. So we'll go to SolidWorks and we'll click on the mirror tool up here, and then on entities to mirror, we'll zoom in and select the 3 holes we want to mirror, and then for mirror about, we'll select the center line. Okay, so now we have those mirrored about and we're done there. So next thing we'll do is we will create all these holes around the center bearing bore. So I will start with these 2 holes on either side, which are 250 thousandths of an inch in diameter and are on a 1.625 bolt circle. So we'll go into SolidWorks and create our 1.625 inch bolt circle, dimension it, and then we'll click on it and click for construction in order to prevent the extrude from trying to extrude that as a hole. Now we'll go over to the circle tool once more and add 2 circles on these little yellow dots that show up when you place the mouse over it. Then we'll set them equal to each other with a relation, and then we'll smart dimension one of them to 0.25 inches. Next we'll add these 3 holes, which are spaced evenly 7/32 in diameter on a 2-inch bolt circle. So we'll go to SolidWorks, create our 2-inch bolt circle, once again set that for construction so it doesn't try to extrude that as a hole. Then we'll just place look for that dot and then place one up here. Then we'll just place the remaining 2 down here somewhere. And once again we'll select all 3 of them and add a relation to make them equal. Now we'll use the smart dimension tool to dimension one of them to 7/32 of an inch, and then they all adjust. Next we'll use the center line tool to click from one to the center of the circle and then to the other. So we have these 2 center lines. Now we can use the smart dimension tool to dimension from vertical to one of those lines and add that to 360 divided by 3, or 120 degrees, so we know that it's spaced 1/3 the way around the circle. Then we'll do the same on the other side. Now we've added all our bolt holes around the center bearing bore. The next thing we're going to do is create these 2 holes. So to do that, we'll create one of them and then we'll mirror it about the center line to create the other. So we'll go to SolidWorks, use the circle tool to create a circle somewhere over here, and then we can look at our drawing and see that it's a 0.196 inch diameter circle, so we can smart dimension it to that. And now we can look and see that it is exactly on the same vertical line with the center of the circle. So in SolidWorks, we'll click the center of that circle and the center of the main bearing bore and add a horizontal relation. And now we can look at our drawing and see that the horizontal distance between them is 2.40 inches. So we'll add a dimension in SolidWorks. Now that we've done this, we can use the mirror tool once more. So we'll select that circle and then mirror it about the center line, and it creates the hole on the opposite side. Okay, now that we've created all the holes on this plate, we need to create the outer profile. So the outer profile of this comprises of 6 round segments connected by 6 lines, and the lines are all tangent to the round segments. So we'll start by creating all these arcs, we'll start with this bottom arc, which is concentric with this circle, so it shares the center. And we can see it has a radius of 1.55 inches. So we'll go into SolidWorks, and use the center point arc tool. Click the center point and create an arc. And now, using Smart Dimension, can dimension it to a radius of 1.55. Now we'll create the top one. So we can see here that it has a radius of 1.3. It's concentric with this circle. So to SolidWorks, use the center point arc. Okay. Now for the remaining 4 arc segments, we can see that it's mirrored. So we'll just create this half of it. Okay, and now for these, which we'll create now, we'll start with this one. So we can see that it's concentric with this hole, has a radius of 1.33 inches. So in SolidWorks, using the center point arc tool, there we go. Dimension it to 1.33. And finally, last arc, this one over here, which has a radius of 0.44 inches. So using the center point arc tool off this hole, now we'll connect all these using the line tool. So from one to the next, one to the next, one to the next. And now we'll make them all tangent. So we'll make this one tangent with this one. Now we can see that all of our lines are tangent to the arcs, and it is turned black, indicating that it's fully defined. Now we'll just take these points and make them vertical with the center, so we're not overlapping with what we're later going to mirror. So now we can mirror the whole thing, so we'll click Mirror Entities, and we'll select our 4 curves and 3 lines. And as a mirror about, we'll select the center line. And we can see that it's created the profile of our part. So now we're ready to extrude the part. So we'll go over to Features, Extruded Boss Base, and we can see that it has a depth of 0.260 inches. So we'll extrude it to that depth. And in Selected Contours, we'll select the main shape of the part. We can see that it's done our extrude. Now, if we look at it, there's these 2 counter bores. One's right there, one's right there. We could see they have a diameter of 0.755 and a depth of 0.62. So we'll go into SolidWorks, create an extruded cut with a sketch up there. I will go to Normal 2, create 2 circles, just hover over it and click the center of the circle. Dimension 1 to 0.755, make them equal, and finally extrude it to the depth of 0.62 inches.